Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Emergency Management Associates. Excuse me. Welcome to Emergency Management Associates. We're coming to you from the Area Command, 392 miles west of Kitty Hawk Beach, North Carolina. We want to welcome everybody to our program tonight. Let's join live in Texas from Ground Zero at an explosion that happened in Fort Worth.
After the explosion at the Sandman Hotel downtown Fort Worth that happened around 3:32 this afternoon. You can see lots of people are standing out there trying to figure out what's going on. Someone's sitting there on the curb being comforted. Yeah, wow. You see a little bit of smoke or fog or something in the air. We don't know scientifically what happened, but you can see the debris. Like we told you, what you were seeing on the chopper was one angle. Yeah. That debris is not, I promise you, it is not contained to what you can see on your TV. It is larger, it is more extensive, and it's more intense.
This is going to be from several stories up in a nearby building, and you can see sort of, again, what you were talking about, that dust up. Not sure if that's actual smoke or if it's just dust from the debris that blew out. You can see how far up it has come up. You can see it from that window, but you get the idea that, many people witness this sort of from that vantage point, because again, at the time of the day, the weather's not great. You're thinking people are either in their office buildings or at a hotel, and this is what they're getting to see.
New video, you just saw one. Yeah, you saw someone there on a stretcher being taken into an ambulance, transported to be treated. And again, we
are praying for them.
Yeah, we are. We're so thankful that these numbers are what they are right now, because like I said, I have seen large-scale gas explosions, gas leaks, and it can be so much worse than what we are seeing right now. Not to say that it's not bad, not to say that this is not a traumatic event. I'm just letting you know that we are grateful and praying for the people involved, for sure.
Just imagine if we were having a beautiful sunny day out there, a mild day. I know that this area on a Monday, especially people coming back from the holidays, probably for a lot of them their first day back to work, back to the routine. I'm sure they would have been, out and about.
And think about college students. Think about TCU kids that might have just been out shopping, out grabbing pizza. This is right near Buffalo Bros, which is a popular pizza and wing spot. I mean, you have to think about...
There's so many places to eat around there.
Exactly.
I think of that all the time, too.
It could have, the time of day we're thankful for, and we're thankful for it, like Jeff said, not being a sunny day. Okay, breaking news. We've got a all clear officially from Fort Worth.
So we just got that.
We just got that literally in the last 2 seconds.
5:28, almost 2 hours after we have the all clear now.
That is good news, and that is key here, because that means they can start moving forward with their investigation, means no one else is at risk, and it means that they can also start to take a look at the magnitude of cleanup and how they start that process.
One other thing that I do want to mention, we talked about that one person that was unaccounted for earlier. That person has been accounted for.
Amazing.
Thank goodness. They have found that person. That person has been connected now with, I'm assuming it's going to be with relatives, with loved ones. That was a hotel guest there at the Sandman Hotel. But again, everyone accounted for right now. So no one unaccounted. That one person, we do know that they're doing okay.
And I just want to really quickly read you a part of a tweet from Mayor Maddie Parker. She says, "My heart and prayers are with those who are injured as we continue managing response." She, of course, says we'll provide more information as available. We want to thank you for sticking with us here for CBS News Texas as we cover this breaking news of a gas leak or gas explosion in downtown Fort Worth at the Sandman Hotel. We'll keep you updated here on air and online at CBS News Texas, and again at 7 and 10 o'clock.
Okay, that's news from downtown Fort Worth. A gas explosion this afternoon has inundated a downtown hotel in Fort Worth, Texas. This comes as brand new news to people in this area. Unknown to people. Nobody knew that anything like this could happen. And yet it has. A gas explosion in downtown Fort Worth inundates a hotel. 11 people have been injured, one of them critically. There had been one person reported missing. They have since found that person as well. We are very grateful for that fact. We're very grateful that those people have been located. Folks, you can never know what's going to happen from one minute to the next. Anything can happen at any time. Now, the first thing I want to do right now is go out to Iceland. Okay? I'm going to get into earthquakes, and I'm going to talk about Cascadia. I'm going to talk about earthquakes in California. I'm going to do that. I want to first go out here to Iceland. We have not talked about Iceland in the last little while. The eruptive sequence that we saw the week before Christmas, the Monday before Christmas, has not returned over in Iceland. This is a present map of Iceland here that you're seeing over in Reykjanesfell Peninsula. Okay? This is what we see here. You can see Grindavik on the bottom lower center part of your slide here. The Blue Lagoon and the Svartsengi power plant are right there where that other black dot is. The Fagradalsfjall volcano is over to the northeast from Grindavik. Folks, you see that dotted line? That dotted line is where we had a huge fissure opened up. 14 plus kilometers opened up on Monday before Christmas. It kept up fountaining. The lava kept fountaining there for 3 days, then it shut down, literally. It has not surfaced again as yet. I want to talk about this because this is a great problem there. Today, I spoke to this gentleman right here. This gentleman right here is a scientist from the University of Iceland. He has a great lot to talk about here. Folks, they believe that the volcano could again erupt at any minute. This is Benedict Gunnar Olfsson, geophysicist and head of deformation measurements at the Meteorological Agency over in Iceland. He says that the land rise around Svartsengi, around where the power plant is not stopped. It's slowed down, but it's continuing. It's not slowing down right now. It's continuing. Okay? Which means at any point, the eruption could continue over in Iceland. This is the area that zoned out, showing the area where anything could literally happen. Okay? Zone 1. Okay? That is over by the Svartsengi power plant. That Zone 3 area is where the lava had erupted just 2 weeks ago. Zone 5 is up to the northwest. Okay? Zone 4 is down to the south. Zone 6 is out to the east side here, and it also encompasses Grindavik. Okay? This could continue, and it could get very dangerous. Everybody is on pins and needles, literally. Okay? Everybody is on pins and needles. I can't emphasize this enough. After speaking with the professor today, everyone is worried. They have let the people in Grindavik return, and they're still inside the town of Grindavik. They have minimum first responders there. All they have are the local police in Greenvik. That's all. All the other people that they had here before January 23rd have gone home to their homes. They're not expected to return anytime soon. Yet the earth continues to rise here. Now, everybody must wonder why. Folks, we posted a picture showing the magma chamber down below Svartsenga last week. The magma chamber below Svartsenga is continuing to inflate. That is what is causing the land to rise under Svartsenga. Svartsenga is west of Greenvik. So far, the uplift around Greenvik has either stopped or very minimal. That's good for those people. But no one knows what's going to happen with that fissure. It may erupt again at that fissure, or it could erupt east of there or north of there. No one knows. Everybody is literally guessing. Everybody is guessing, guys. Here you see the Frogsdalfjall volcano. Again, this is northeast of Greenvik. The Blue Lagoon and Svartsenga power plant is down to the south of there. Now, they continue to have earthquakes just northeast of Iceland. There is an island called Grimsey. Grimsey has been where we've had 1.5, 1.7, 1.9, 2.3, 2.5, and 2.7 magnitude earthquakes. While these are minor earthquakes, they're hitting off the northeast coast of Iceland, right here on this small island. Nobody would have thought they'd continue here, but they have. Is the volcano going to erupt here? That is unknown. This is just a very small, tiny island northeast of Iceland here. Nobody knows. Look how high off the ocean surface that this island is. You can see the volcanic rock, the lava rock, that juts out of the North Atlantic Ocean here. It's green grass. It's not necessarily green though, okay? This area is considered to be way, way above the Arctic Circle, okay? Tundra area, okay? Could this volcano erupt here? Yes, it's possible. Anything could happen. Literally anything could happen. Now, there's also something else that we've talked about over in Iceland. The Mid-Atlantic Fault comes directly through the Reykjanes Peninsula to the south here. That's where Greenvik is on the Reykjanes Peninsula. Notice where this Mid-Atlantic Fault goes through. Right straight through Iceland. It is expanding the Atlantic, meaning the Atlantic Ocean is expanding, but it is also expanding through Iceland as well, ripping Iceland apart. Great big huge fissures have opened up because of the great big huge mid-North Atlantic Fault. And now we have volcanic action in the area as well. We're going to keep a very close eye on this for you, and we'll be back here as more information becomes available. But like I said, we are keeping a close eye on Iceland as well. I honestly don't think that this is going to be very much longer before it becomes a huge problem. Now, someone here in the chat said a 6.9 earthquake just struck south of Japan. Let's go over to the USGS map and let's take a look at what has happened during the past, I want to say 12 hours on the worldwide map here. Okay, you don't see any earthquakes at all south of Japan. The one earthquake that we had was earlier today. This happened at 8:15 this morning Eastern Time. This is south of, southeast, I should say, from Sarangani, Philippines. This earthquake is. Sarangani, Philippines is a small set, well actually two islands just southeast of Mindanao, Philippines. Okay, this is a 6.7 earthquake. A 6.7 earthquake here. This is north of Indonesia. This is southeast of Sarangani, Philippines. It's a 6.7 earthquake. This seismic energy was absorbed by the South Pacific Ocean waters. Nobody knows this earthquake except anyone that may have possibly been on one of these outlying islands. And yes, you can see islands out here to the southeast from where that earthquake hit. And yes, I'm sure there are people that live on some of these islands here. Okay? In fact, you can see roads here where people live. Okay? This could be very much a worst case scenario. It's not far from most islands, but fortunately for people, it was out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean out here. Everybody got very lucky. Okay? Virginia says, Heather, may you heal quickly. Yes, Heather has not been feeling good for about 24 hours. And our prayers go out to her, and our prayers go out to all the people within the sound of our voice and the influence, to those people that need God's healing. A friend of mine has a sister and a brother-in-law, and the sister is in stage 4 cancer, and she needs our prayers as well. Richard Smith says we're already buffering. Oh, isn't that just great? We're buffering. I'm seeing 2,600, 2,400 kilobytes per second. We just went down to 1,960 kilobytes per second, back up to 2,700, 3,200 kilobytes per second. Say, folks, this may be due to the weather as well. Okay? I'm not going to take the weather faction out of it as well. Weather is a great big huge problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem throughout tonight and into the next 2 or 3 days. Before I get too much further into this broadcast, early this morning we received a weather warning. This warning was for very bad weather up and down the east coast of North America. There's also weather warnings issued all over North America, Canada, as well as the United States. Weather warnings. There we go. We know for a fact, because we've heard from people that live up here in southwestern Canada and the Pacific Northwest. They have very bad storms. Heavy rain and heavy snow throughout this whole area. stretching all the way down into California, Northern California, and eastward across the country. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and eastern Washington and Oregon should find anywhere from 12 to 15 inches of snow and very erratic high winds of 35 to 50 miles per hour. Those winds and snow are going to be across Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma, across North and South Dakota, and going over Wisconsin. Canadian people are already experiencing blizzards in Saskatchewan, Canada, Winnipeg area, and all the way over to the northeast of Quebec and Toronto, even Maryland, New Hampshire area here, all the way down to New York. Very bad weather conditions, guys. Here in North Carolina, we are expecting heavy winds, hurricane force winds up above 50 miles per hour tonight, and a lot of rain. Everybody needs to batten down the hatches all over the United States, and I'm going to probably say Europe as well. This is a bad storm. It's going to stretch from Georgia all the way to the north, to the Atlantic Northeast. We have weather coming out of the Gulf, and that's going to mix. We may see not just high winds and heavy rain, but snow and tornadoes. Snow and tornadoes up and down the hogback of the Eastern Continental Divide. This is not going to be fun at all. Not at all. Over on Facebook and Messenger. She warned me early this morning after my weather warnings went off. This is going to continue, and it's not going to be pretty. DD says sound keeps cutting in and out. I'm so sorry. I do not know what's causing it. I have no clue what might be causing it at all. Is this helping now? I just switched microphones. Does this help at all? Folks, can I get a 5x5? I just switched microphones. Is this any better? Grace for purposes, thank you, yes, good. Kimberly Hopkins says the audio keeps breaking up. Virginia says it appears to help. 5x5 Demon Catman and Don Howard. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it. Richard Smith says 5x5 as well. Folks, I'm telling you, things are not going to be pretty from tonight, probably for the next 2 or 3 days. We will keep track of what's going on and keep a close eye and tell you what's happening. But folks, I'm telling you, it's not going to be pretty at all. USGS only shows 32 earthquakes around the world. We know that is dead wrong. It's dead wrong. We have probably close to 900 earthquakes worldwide. They're hardly showing any earthquakes at all in Alaska. For example, all they're showing over in south central Alaska is one earthquake, a 2.6 minor earthquake in Houston, Alaska. That's a joke. Alaska usually has 60 to 70 earthquakes here every day. They're showing one. What a lousy representation of a seismic energy or seismic agency that we have at the head of the government. It's a joke. It really is a joke. One of the other larger earthquakes that we've had today is over here or just off the coast, I should say, of south central Sumatra. This is a 5.2 large earthquake, 29 kilometers southeast of Tuapiat, Indonesia, 18.7 kilometers deep. Okay? That's a very shallow earthquake. Compared to this one over in the Philippines, this is 68 kilometers deep. 68 kilometers deep. This doesn't even shake a stick at over here in Iran. This is a 4.7. They say is 10 kilometers deep. What a joke. What a frickin' joke. Over here, in the border area of Syria and Turkey, this is a 4.3 earthquake. Folks, this is just one of about 27 earthquakes here in this area. What a joke. They're not showing any other earthquakes around Europe. You know, I just feel sorry for this agency. They have lost all respect of everyone around the world. Literally. Literally. Now, I want to talk about earthquakes. Okay? Earlier today, actually this happened on Saturday, Southern California. Southern California Weather Force issued an earthquake watch for Southern California. Let's get into detail about what's happening in Southern California. They issued an earthquake watch that is effective through today for a chance of stronger earthquakes happening on the San Andreas Fault. On Friday, we had a 4.5 earthquake just northeast of Rancho Cucamonga, California, near Lytle Creek, California, a 4.5. That happened at 10:55 a.m. on the 5th. They later downgraded this to a 4.2, and I since found out it came out as a 4.8. This occurred at the junction point of the San Andreas and the San Jacinto Fault. This area last shook with a foreshock in the 1970s, which is what this might be, a possible foreshock. At the current time, there have been absolutely no aftershocks that have been recorded from this 4.8 earthquake that happened in Lytle Creek, California on Friday. This could very well mean it is a foreshock, or a shock that is before the main shock. You can think of it as holding onto a ledge. A finger slips and you get a jolt. You still have the rest of your hand left before you finally let go and then slip completely. This is my analogy of this foreshock. If this is a foreshock, we now have through today to see if there's going to be a main shock. And just because it may or may not happen today doesn't mean it won't happen. Okay? A larger earthquake on the San Andreas Fault will rip northwestward through the Inland Empire and the high desert zones of Los Angeles, Antelope Valley, Kern County areas, along with Ventura zones as well. Should it break the entire fault southward, you have Big Bear, Banning, California, Coachella Valley, and even down to the Imperial Valley. You see represented over here on the lower right hand side of this slide as the Salton Sea. Better to be safe than sorry. I want to say this. Those of you who live in Southern California, you need to make sure you have your emergency preparedness kits ready. The threat of earthquakes extends across the entire San Francisco Bay Area. A major quake is likely before 2032. 2032. This is less than 9 years away. A major earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area that could happen between now and 2032. Knowing this will help people make informed decisions as they continue to prepare for future earthquakes. What size earthquake might the big one be in Southern California? Let's talk about that. The southern portion of the 700-mile-long San Andreas Fault has not had an earthquake around the size of a 7.0 since 1690. It's come close. San Francisco Bay and Los Angeles have both seen 6.9s. 6.9 hit in Northridge, California in 1994. In 1989, San Francisco Bay had a 6.9. During the beginning of the 1989 October World Series. A 2008 projection between the Great California Shakeout estimated that a potential 7.8 earthquake in the southern section of the San Andreas Fault could have a death toll as high as 1,800 people gone. Living in California means living in earthquake country. Thousands of earthquakes occur in California every year, most of which are too small for residents to feel. 1.7 tremors, 2.8 earthquake, all the way up to 3.5 earthquakes, sometimes are not even felt. With the February 2023 earthquake last year in Turkey and Syria, that came out as a 7.8, and as I have stated before, that earthquake was a 9.0, 10.0 earthquake. That earthquake has killed over 50,000 people in that region. Questions all around are about what California fault might be next for the big one. Nobody knows. It's an educated guess. But it's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. To understand what faults might be overdue for a main earthquake, experts say that it's important to understand what the big one could do. Let's talk about that. When people think of a big earthquake, a magnitude 8.0 earthquake on the Richter scale might come to mind. Dr. Pat Abbott, professor of geology emeritus at San Diego State University in their seismology department, said the threshold for a big one in California could look like but might not be as simple as a big one from anywhere else in California. The last big one in California's recorded earthquake history was 1857 in the central third portion of the San Andreas Fault and the 1906 earthquake in the northern third. Both were under the 8.0 earthquake threshold. California's north coast has had a long history of strong earthquakes. While there hasn't been many over 7.5 in recent history, that's not to say there haven't been major earthquakes since then. The 1989 San Francisco Bay earthquake we talked about and the 1994 Northridge earthquakes, for instance, were both devastating and destructive shocks. They both caused widespread damage to infrastructure and considerable loss of life. But both of those earthquakes were under a 7.0 magnitude. At least that's what the experts say. We've since found out that the Northridge earthquake was more like a 7.5. The San Francisco Bay earthquake has been likened to an 8.0. Now, technically, that's not the big one. But when you go back out and look at what has happened, each of these earthquakes were horrendous. The impact that a very large, substantial earthquake, whether it's 6.5 or an 8.0, largely depends on the proximity to an urbanized area. the proximity to a very densely populated area. In some respects, the big one in terms of damages and deaths would be an earthquake that would be running through towns, cities, villages, and around bridges that would fall down during one of these quakes. The major earthquake pretty much will not happen outside of town. The earthquake will happen in an urbanized area. There's the size of the earthquake, and then also where you are situated compared to where the earth fault is moving. The southern San Andreas Fault is particularly of concern for experts when looking at places that are overdue for a 7.5 earthquake that's going to impact areas like San Bernardino, Palm Springs, and the Imperial County. That portion of the 700-mile-long fault has not had an earthquake around this size in magnitude since 1690. Which California landmarks are at risk from a massive earthquake? Scientists are especially worried about a smaller fault that is overdue for a major earthquake. The smaller fault is the Hayward Fault. The Hayward Fault was responsible for the 6.9 earthquake in San Francisco. That runs directly under all the cities in the South Bay of San Francisco. Part of the worry there is not just the magnitude, but the whole East Bay area is full of old cities that have a lot of old buildings. You could have a horrendous loss of life from a magnitude 6.5 earthquake. With these two areas of concern for seismologists and for city fathers, there are a number of potential scenarios that could play out on the Earth's crust. Some of those which could look a lot like a catastrophic magnitude 9.0 in Turkey and Syria due to the similarities in the way those faults are set up compared to California. Alice Gabriel is an assistant professor of seismology with the Scripps Institute of Geophysics and Planetary Physics. She said, "We are challenged by these earthquakes happening so rarely. It's just a very large, long time scale. Now we have the Turkey events, which were very devastating, but also have important lessons for each of us. One such lesson is potential for what they call a doublet earthquake, or additional earthquakes triggered along nearby faults to one that has a big one that has happened. Let's take, for instance, a very large earthquake, a 7+ earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. Look around Los Angeles. What other faults could be triggered by the San Andreas Fault? Any one of those faults in the Los Angeles urban corridor could be triggered. The Newport Inglewood Fault out to the west. That could also trigger the huge Rose Canyon Fault that runs from Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego. The Rose Canyon Fault could trigger a 7.0 to 7.5 earthquake in San Diego. A doublet earthquake. The San Andreas Fault ripping and one of the other faults in Los Angeles or San Diego ripping at the same time. It can happen. It's happened in the past. Something that we saw in Turkey that's really difficult to predict is that there wasn't just one earthquake. There wasn't just one earthquake over off the northeast side of Mindanao, Philippines either. There wasn't just one earthquake over on the western side of Japan last week. There wasn't just one earthquake in a lot of situations anywhere. Usually it is multiple quakes and side by side earthquakes that happen when these big earthquakes hit. The doublet earthquake in Turkey was triggered 9 hours and a few minutes later. A second event that was much larger that turned out to be a 9.0, 10.0 earthquake. California's largest earthquakes of the 21st century. The Hayward Fault would be a candidate for a secondary earthquake that is dynamically set off when an earthquake like a 7.4 were to hit in Southern California. Considering how much stress is already built up between the plates, mirroring what was seen in Turkey, this could happen in Southern California. Despite what can be learned from events like Turkey's quake, it's still impossible to determine exactly where and when a big earthquake might happen, and when it might be or what it might look like. Experts say that California likely wouldn't see as much destruction and loss of life as Turkey, due to the concerted state efforts toward earthquake safety. Jose Lara, who is chief of the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Seismic Howard's branch, said, "No one can really tell you whether one fault is going to rupture over another fault. We just don't know." Both faults over at the Newport Inglewood and the San Andreas are long overdue. The Hayward Fault and the Calaveras Fault are long overdue. The San Andreas Fault, stretching from Northern California from the Cascadia subduction zone south to Mexico, could erupt at any time. Open up and destroy property and lives. California is in a much better position to withstand an earthquake because of decades-old mitigation efforts that have occurred. But, as you all know, the fight for earthquake preparedness is not over. The endeavors include regular updating and enforcement of building codes in California, and dedicated work by officials towards developing catastrophic plans that would guide the government's response, from the deployment of emergency personnel to emergency supply chains. Now, I want to just briefly talk about how you can find out if a property is located to a seismic hazard zone. There are official maps of seismic hazard zones that are issued periodically by the California Geological Survey in compliance with the Seismic Hazard Mapping Act. The easiest way to find out if a property is located in a seismic hazard zone is to use the California Earthquake Hazard Zone application. I'm going to repeat. Use the California Earthquake Hazard Zone application, or search their collective online maps on the internet. You can also visit one of the California Geological Survey offices. You could call ahead. The California Geological Survey offices, or in your city or county office of San Diego or Los Angeles. Your county assessor or the county recorder or the planning agency are all required to post notices that advise the public of the availability and the location of seismic hazard zone maps that affect your county. Consult the appropriate local agency in your area. If you're uncertain about whether your property lies within a seismic hazard fault area, it probably does. How do you check if your house is in an earthquake zone? You can go to EQZAP, EQZAPP. You can type in an address or use the local location capability on your computer or your mobile device to determine whether a property lies with any of the CGS mapped earthquake hazard zones. The California Geological Survey's mapped earthquake hazard areas. It will also tell you if that area has yet been evaluated according to the hazards in that area. Regardless of how the next large-scale earthquake ends up happening, I have been stressing this for a long time. Everyone needs to be prepared for any eventuality. An eventuality that a major earthquake will occur near where you live. It doesn't matter whether you live in California, whether you live in Canada, Washington, Oregon, North Dakota, Florida, or North Carolina. Any one place can have an earthquake at any time. What do you need to do? You need to identify and secure everything in your own home or where you work. Anything that could possibly fall during a major quake, like a china cabinet, a refrigerator, even a bookcase or a ceiling fan could fall from the ceiling. The other thing you need to do is you need to put together and write your own household emergency preparedness plan. You need to write your own household emergency preparedness plan. We've been talking about this for a good long time. I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm not going to stop talking about it. It's not just an earthquake plan. It's an emergency preparedness plan. It can contain items like flashlights, cash, salting away dimes, nickels, pennies, quarters, and dollar bills, cash, food, clothing, emergency first aid items, in case damage to critical infrastructure occurs in your area. Even though Californians continue to improve their building standards after every earthquake, things do get a little safer. It's not the same thing as saying, is everything safe? Everything is not safe. California does get safer all the time, but there's still a lot of danger. There's still a lot of danger. Now, with that said, I'm not going to stop with just Southern California tonight. I want to talk about Cascadia. Last Friday, we talked about earthquakes in and around the Cascadia subduction zone. I want to continue that talk right now. The Cascadia subduction zone is a region where two tectonic plates are colliding. Let's bring up the USGS map again. At least it's good for one thing, for reference points. They may not tell us where earthquakes are occurring. We will. Emergency Management Associates will always tell where earthquakes are occurring and what you need to do to prepare for them. Notice this one thing. The USGS shows no earthquakes at all in Canada, Washington, Oregon, or anywhere in California. Look at that. This is terrible. This is terrible, guys. USGS should be appalled by itself. They're showing one earthquake right here. This is in the Pinnacles area south of Monterey Bay, California. This is a 2.7 earthquake. They're showing one other earthquake here in Southern California. That's in Ridgecrest. This is a 3.1 today. A 2.7 in the Pinnacles south of Monterey Bay on the San Andreas Fault. And this earthquake, a 3.1 in Ridgecrest on the northeast end of the Garlock Fault. Isn't that something? They're not saying anything about any of the earthquakes, and we know there are several hundred earthquakes that have hit in California by itself. and they're not saying anything. This agency should be appalled for itself. Now, the Cascadia subduction zone, guys, I want to show you this. The Cascadia subduction zone runs from the southern tip of the Queen Charlotte Island, British Columbia, all the way down the western coast of British Columbia, all the way down the western coast of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. The Cascadia subduction zone then runs into what they call the Triple Junction. The Triple Junction just off the coast of Northern California. The Cascadia subduction zone meets up with the Gorda Escarpment here and the San Andreas Fault. The Cascadia subduction zone, the Gorda Escarpment, and the San Andreas Fault make up the Triple Junction. This is why it is very dangerous. This is exactly why it is so dangerous. Let's back up here to Washington State, just off the coast. Okay? Folks, this is dangerous. The Cascadia subduction zone is going to be where the Cascadia megathrust earthquake is going to happen. Okay? Just off the coast of Seattle-Tacoma area, just off the coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. It's a region where two tectonic plates are colliding. The Juan de Fuca Fault, a small oceanic plate, is being driven underneath the North American plate, atop which the continental United States sits, the North American plate. Subduction systems. Folks, the Pacific plate runs from Alaska all the way down into southern Mexico. The Pacific plate is subducting under the entire North American plate. Canada and the United States constitute the North American plate. Subducting, going and deep diving underneath the North American plate. This is capable of producing the world's largest known earthquakes. This is a prime example. The 2011 Tokyo earthquake, the rocked Japan. That was a 9.0 subduction quake. Cascadia has been seismically quiet, very quiet compared to other subduction zones, but it's not completely inactive. Research indicates that the fault ruptured in a magnitude 9.0 event in 1700. That's roughly 30 times more powerful than the largest predicted San Andreas earthquake. Researchers suggest that we are within a roughly 300 to 500 year window during which another large Cascadia event may occur. In 2016, government officials did participate in a very extensive earthquake drill, Cascadia Rising. I was there. Federal, state, and local officials from several other surrounding states participated in the earthquake drill along with units from the National Guard. For years before, participants worked on plans and protocols for a possible rupture of the Cascadia Fault region. In June 7th through the 10th, 2016, teams that I was a part of came together with several states and other agencies and fully opened the emergency operations centers that were participating in Spokane and in Seattle and Portland. Increasing concern about the possibility of a megathrust earthquake, and another report suggests that the growth of subtle electromagnetic signals that have been detected in the upper atmosphere of the Earth and many other parts of the world and in the oceans of the world. The most intense signals appear on the U.S. West Coast and parts of the Midwest. Some of these signals also appear in the upper latitudes of North America and in the southern Pacific Ocean. More ominously, a report says that scientists have confirmed the independent analysis of a New Zealand mathematician and a long-term weather forecaster whose name is Ken King, who predicted the deadly earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand. Scientists have declared, like other citizens have thought, that it is only a matter of when, not if, a devastating earthquake strikes, like what happened in Christchurch, New Zealand, and also in Alaska, that could unleash a tsunami that could wreak havoc across other large parts of the world. The Cascadia megathrust earthquake in 1700 unleashed a tsunami that went all the way across the ocean waters to Japan. The rupture of the fault line could cause damage and destruction on a scale bigger than the Japanese earthquake and tsunami of 2011. Ken King explained his methodology for forecasting earthquakes in the following way. Other planets have a strong influence on the Earth, but indirectly by influencing the Sun. Some planets are very large. If the Sun were a basketball, and the gas giants Jupiter and Saturn would be the size of a grapefruit, and the Earth on such a scale would be the size of a grain of pepper. Jupiter and Saturn can cause extra pull on the Sun, as in the case of the Earth and the Moon. These large-scale solar tides become solar activity and solar flares. These large-scale solar tides become solar activity and solar flares. No one can disregard this any longer. Together with these normal plate tectonics and these underground forces, for example, Jupiter and Saturn create time tug-of-wars with the Earth in the center. We've talked about electromagnetic energy. Planetary alignments create electromagnetic energy that specifically affects the Earth's plates and affects the core of the Earth. That's why in different places earthquakes occur above a 7.0 magnitude quake. Now, when we refer to pressure associated with the catastrophic earthquake in the Midwest, which today continues to suffer from heavy rainfall and snow, and in particular, they affect the New Madrid Fault in Arkansas, which is the only in the last 6 months has experienced several hundred seismic events. The New Madrid Fault, I repeat, in the last 6 months has experienced several hundred seismic events. But the most ominous in this report is a warning that penetrated faults in California can survive the most devastating earthquake in last decades. I repeat, penetrated faults in California can survive the most devastating earthquake in the last decades. Further, this is interesting because of the Cascadia drill. The U.S. declared that the rare exercises with the U.S. military, the National Guard, and agencies of the federal government, the states and local governments that have trained together, and Canadian representatives were there with us in Washington. Canadian representatives, the State Department, U.S. Agencies for International Development. We had agencies of the Red Cross. We had agencies of the National Guard. We had the FBI, the CIA. We had drug enforcement. We had every agency of the federal government. We had every agency that you can think of from Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California, and parts of Utah. Agencies were all over from those areas helping Washington. Because when that Cascadia megathrust earthquake happens, it's not just going to affect Washington and Oregon. It's going to affect a large area including Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. By the way, those agencies in Montana and Wyoming were also represented in Washington State as well in 2016. All of these agencies are certainly ready to go to work. Now, we talked about preparedness plans. The preparedness plan that everyone that we've been discussing and we've been planning. Agencies are planning. Private families and cities and towns are planning. There are coordination going on between scientists and government officials, emergency services, health providers, business experts. As everyone knows, the longer the wait, the bigger the quake. Guaranteed. With major earthquakes rattling around the Pacific Ring of Fire lately, we know that the plates have been locked and the energy stress and force is locked up. But when it does release, that power and unleashed fury will be very dangerous and devastating. Though we still have a lot of work to do, we can be proud of the 2-year effort and commitment that we put together in the whole wide community in Washington State in 2016. Every community in the area was involved. They made sure that time and resources were available to support the collective earthquake recovery effort in support of this important Cascadia initiative. After all, it's going to become incumbent on our regional partnerships and our collaboration to execute our critical mission of supporting the survivors when they need us most. Now, folks, I've met hundreds of people. I have met probably thousands of people in my years doing disaster work. When the catastrophic megathrust earthquake occurs around the world, and I'm saying around the world, the Cascadia megathrust earthquake will not just be a local event. The Cascadia megathrust earthquake is going to occur. It's going to affect a wide area, not just the Pacific Northwest. Now, a lot of people think that they have been ignored. A lot of areas think they've been ignored or totally not addressed at all. These earthquakes, this energy poses a direct threat. We believe that we can support the survivors and hopefully save many lives. Since 2012, geologists have been able to deploy 55 GPS monitors across the Cascadia area in Oregon to record the subtle ground movements and deformation that can result from the plate's inability to slide past each other. These sensors have recorded at least 20 earthquakes per day and over 80,000 earthquakes per year. If we are indeed having at least 20 earthquakes per day, why is USGS and the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network not reporting these to the general public? We have the seismographs deployed on the ocean floor. We have them deployed. Why are the agencies not reporting the information to the public? Just like historic seismicity, the plate locking, as it is more common in the northern and southern parts of Cascadia and Southern California. We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen. Geologists are now able to observe difficult to detect seismic rumblings, known as tremors. Tremors, again, I want to define for you. Excuse me, I'll get a drink of water. The tremors are 1.0 to 1.9 tremors. 1.0 to 1.9 tremors. These events occur over the time span of several minutes up to weeks, taking much longer than typical earthquakes. They don't cause large ground motions, and they do not release significant amounts of energy as once thought. Permanent seismic stations have helped build a robust catalog of events and tremors that seem to be more concentrated along the northern and southern parts of the Cascadia Fault Zone. Our results provide new insights into how this subduction zone acts, and possibly others as well, how they behave over geologic time and time frames of millions of years. Unfortunately, our results provide new insights in how this subduction zone and possibly others behave over time frames. But unfortunately, our results can't completely forecast when the next large Cascadia megathrust earthquake is going to occur. This will require much more scientific research, and it's going to require dense active monitoring of the subduction zone, both onshore and offshore, using seismic, GPS-like stations to capture event information. Now, what we see happening is abhorrent. The agency not reporting seismic energy is abhorrent. I am asking today for the United States Geological Survey, pressured by Congress, to start reporting information immediately. I'm going to state it again. I'm asking this moment for the United States Geological Survey to start reporting scientific seismic information immediately to the public, pressured by Congress. Congress is one of the problems. Politicians are part, or if not a major part, of the problem, telling managers of the USGS to not report information. As you can see, up and down the entire coast of northwestern America, there's hardly any information at all regarding seismic activity. This is abhorrent. This should never have happened. The work has to be done. But this does suggest that a larger event is likely to start in either northern or southern sections of the fault, where the plates are more fully locked. This remains important for the public and the policymakers to stay informed about the potential risks involved in living in a subduction zone fault, to support programs that are still under development, such as the Earthquake Early Warning System, that seeks to expand our monitoring capabilities and mitigate loss in the event of large rupture. With last Friday's 4.8 earthquake in Lidell, California, the earthquake early warning system only gave 2.5 seconds warning that that earthquake was going to occur. 2.5 second warning. That doesn't sound like much, but it is a start. A warning that could expand and could stop people from succumbing to the earthquake's devastation and mitigate the loss of a large rupture. It's also important for people that live in these areas to become better prepared to a point that they will survive a severe Cascadia megathrust earthquake that will occur. Folks, we've talked about this. The Cascadia megathrust earthquake will start off the north coast of Washington State. That's where it's going to start. It's going to be felt all the way up in Alaska. It's going to be felt all the way down the coast of Oregon, California, and down into northern Mexico. We need today to start to eat, preach, and live a lifestyle. We must teach ourselves, our families, and our friends what it means to be prepared and what to do when an emergency strikes. We need to develop emergency preparedness kits and to write out exercise preparedness plans. To write out and exercise emergency preparedness plans with our family, our business, and our community, our entire community, and every neighborhood in our communities. This is mandatory that we do this so that we all are going to be ready when these earthquakes occur. It's not just going to be one earthquake. It's going to be multiple earthquakes. It's going to be multiple earthquakes. It's going to be multiple earthquakes. I said this 3 times. I said this 3 times. That means this is important. This is important. Folks, we need to pay attention. This is time to pay attention. We don't have any more time to mess around here. We don't have the time. We don't have the time. Careful study over a period of time has provided us more data that's going to assist us in understanding the rate of the development of the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. The search for the precursor activity began back in 2017. It began with the discovery of a very loose history of the Seismic cone in British Columbia. The Seismic cone in British Columbia. It erupted during the time of 1700 Cascadia megathrust earthquake then. And a single mariner's logbook. The entry into the logbook stated that either Mount Rainier or Glacier Peak was erupting at the time of the 1700 megathrust earthquake. There are clues to a connection between volcanic activity and the Cascadia megaquakes. Now, I understand this is not much to go on, and we need more substantial data. We've searched for it, and we did find data. This is a summary of the data that we found. The process is building up pressure over hundreds of years. The Cascadia megathrust earthquake is the development of pressure over hundreds of years, and it's caused by the movement of the North American plate in the southwestern southwesterly direction. As I stated early in this program, the Atlantic Fault, the entire mid-Atlantic Fault is expanding. And the expansion of the mid-Atlantic Fault is pushing the North American Fault in a southwesterly direction. This is an established outcome of plate tectonics. This force overcomes the friction at the plate boundary zones and begins a process of subduction, the Pacific Plate subducting under the North American Plate. This presents initially as subduction zone creep, with the plate just barely moving, subduction zone creep. Subduction creep causes subduction specific tremor signatures. We've talked about that tremor signatures before. Those are recorded at the volcanic mounds above and along the contact boundary line. The volcanic mounds, seamounts. There are volcanic seamounts at the plate boundaries under the ocean. Signatures are being recorded at Cascadia volcanic locations. To the south, Oregon, Crater Lake, Newberry Volcano, a site 18 miles west of Jefferson, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, and Glacier Peak, where we presently have the machine. It's amazing. They turn off the seismograph at Glacier Peak when all the other seismographs are all going off all over the place, with earthquakes and tremors hitting every day. And even as far north as Mount Baker and Seismic volcano in Canada, Mount Meager in British Columbia. Seamount activity at 6 seamounts undersea volcanic cones from mid-Vancouver Island west and north of Haida Gwaii. Since the 26th of September 2019, we found a hotspot at Seismic Cone, Seismic River Cone, or the Yayanish volcano. That is a young cinder cone which has adjacent lava flows. Everyone, including the Seismic Agency in Canada, is watching this. There's also another volcano called Ediziza, Edziza, Mount Ediziza in northwest British Columbia. It's a large, complex stratovolcano that's about 1 million years old. It forms the most recently active of a group of overlanding and overlapping basaltic shield volcanoes, lava domes, and lava flows, and central stratovolcanoes. Mount Ediziza contains a 2-kilometer wide ice-filled summit caldera with a summit crater and several flank vents. The volcano's lava range from basalt to rhyolite. This frequents volcanic activity of the complex area that's been going on for over 8 million years. But the last eruptions occurred only about 1,000 years ago. Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen and Sutter Buttes and little-known Mount Trowbridge in British Columbia, and an unnamed Vancouver mountain with 2 very clear calderas, one on top and one on the flank of the volcano. Using overlapping infrared satellite images from the College of Dupage. We undertook a meticulous count of hotspots of West North America from mid-British Columbia to the northern border of Mexico. This included all of the coast and as far east as Alberta, Montana, West Wyoming, West Colorado, Utah, and Arizona. And that is a huge area indeed. A total of 130 hotspots were spread across that area. About 3 years ago, you would be lucky to find even 10 hotspots for the same area. Mount Shasta recently had a hotspot and has had increased activity. More recently, we counted over 136 hotspots in British Columbia alone. Slash burns accounted for approximately 25% of those hotspots. Slash burns. British Columbia had 17 hotspots before the 26, just to put two and two together. Why are these hotspots important? Because the majority of these hotspots relate to magmatic rise. Magmatic rise that causes crustal heating. Magmatic rise that causes crustal heating. A smaller percentage relate to fires. Mammoth Mountain has had many swarms of earthquakes as of late, and that is also in increase. I have also talked about this, and we've noted this as an increase in the number of small earthquakes are being reported at widespread volcanic locations across western North America, to include the Mojave Desert of Southern California. Let's talk about the discovery and interpreting of the data. Immense pressure is required to create an immense earthquake, such as the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. There's been a demonstrable increase in symptoms of immense pressure going back about 6 months. The combined data that's been accumulated reveals the truth of this. The seismology also says that the process of subduction is underway. We have proven that during our previous programs here. The moderate 4.7 earthquake just a few days ago, and other such seismic activity over the last few months, is evidence, along with the seismic creep that we have witnessed in the same time period. Seismic creep, we talked about that last Thursday. We showed you seismic creep happening in Washington State. The melting of the friction points. The melting of the friction points restrained the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. The friction points, we talked about that also. What are the friction points? The area where the Pacific plate meets with the North American plate and begins a deep dive under the North American plate. That friction point where the two plates meet. What's holding it together? All the gunk and grime, the dirt, the sand, the biological material. All of that stuff is holding those plates together. What has been happening? Not just there at the Cascadia megathrust earthquake locations. What else has been happening? We have seen a great increase in solar activity. Coronal mass ejections. A week ago, we saw an X5 flare released from the eastern side of the sun. I'm sorry, not the eastern, the western terminator of the sun. An X5 class flare. That was on the western edge of the sun. If that flare had launched off of the sun in an earth-facing direction, we may have seen the possible annihilation of civilization as we know it. That could have resulted in a Carrington event. We don't know. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But with solar flares like this, those solar flares like that launched the 9.0 earthquake in Japan. I'm sorry, not 9, the 8.4 earthquake in Japan. We've seen it. It has happened. We had a 9.0, 10.0 activity over off the northeast coast of Mindanao, Philippines, just about a month ago. That happened too. Solar activity precipitates some of this activity. It heats up the plates. It melts all that gunk and grime that are holding the plates together. It turns it into an oily, greasy substance that allows the plates to more freely move. That's what happens. That is the same thing holding the Cascadia plate, the North American plate, and the Pacific plate together. Any day we could expect to see a Cascadia megathrust earthquake. The subduction-specific signatures that we've seen at these earthquakes I've talked about prove this. The melting that I just talked about extends literally over time along the plate boundaries. Literally. The entire plate boundaries are holding them together. There's also significant data to show that the area east of San Francisco and south of San Jose, California, are showing signs of volcanic instability. There's significant data to show that the area east of San Francisco and south of San Jose, California, are showing signs of volcanic instability, as witnessed during the final days of October 2019, when there were earthquakes in those areas. These have been shown to have volcanic influence. Los Banos, Tres Pinos, 2020, Tres Pinos, a 5.1 earthquake. The Pinnacles, 4.5, 4.8. Those are just small and moderate increased seismic activity. The area between Vancouver, British Columbia and Santa Barbara is showing signs of volcanism happening. Between British Columbia and Santa Barbara is showing signs of volcanism happening, and this bears further close study. This area could come apart at the very seams in the very near future. You can check for yourself the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. You can check the Canadian volcanolive.com /Edziza HTML. I have given you my own personal observations of this area. Now, there's a lot more that needs to be thought about. A lot more. There are no specific evacuation routes available. There are no known substantial evacuation routes available. I'm telling you. What's going on? When this happens, when these earthquakes start hitting, what do you think that's going to happen? Everybody's going to run for the mountains. Everyone is going to head east. There are 2-lane blacktop highways in most cases, running east and west away from the coast. Not just in Washington and Oregon, but also in California. A lot of the bridges that are in those areas that are covering wide expanses of land and also rivers. Those bridges are old bridges. Old bridge pilings are going to succumb to the seismic shaking. If you think you're going to get away from what is going on, you're going to need to have a bicycle, a motorcycle, or 4-wheel drive vehicle, a truck, an SUV, at the very minimum. You're going to need to plan for what's going on. Richard Smith says road closures and traffic jams. Absolutely right. What are you doing? Have you made plans for what you're going to do? Have you made plans? We've talked about this, folks. We've advised everyone to have at least 3 different evacuation routes. Not just from fire, but from earthquakes, any kind of other disaster that might happen, flooding included. Flooding included. These bridges are no longer going to be there. Those bridges were probably last built within the last 30 to 70 years. They're not going to last. I've been over some of those bridges. I'm just trying to give you the information as I see it. A lot of this is not going to be survivable bridge-wise. What are you going to do? Are you going to wait until the event happens? I hardly hope not. If you wait till it happens, you probably won't survive. And yet this earthquake is survivable. This earthquake is survivable if you start now. If you start now. This earthquake is survivable. Only if you're planning. Only if you're ready. If you're ready. I've been looking at this. I've looked over and over and over again. All over the areas. I've looked at every possible thing that you can think of to help any of us. To help any of us with what's going on. I'm not necessarily an expert. I'm just a citizen scientist that have been putting 2 and 2 together. It's only you that are going to make it happen. There are no absolutely safe routes or even safe zones following the upcoming Cascadia megathrust earthquake. There are only safer routes or safer zones. Some associated risks can be avoided entirely, and others reduced. My entire intent is to inform you of the associated risks that so you can act and reduce your own risk exposure following the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. This is going to be according to your own best decisions. Not my decisions alone, but yours. Few people currently recognize that the reactivation of volcanoes and volcanic fields has been occurring for over 6 months. Few people can even look at that. We've talked about it. Over the last 4.5 years that we've been on the air, we've showed you evidence of tree kill evidence that shows us that sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide have been seeping out of the ground around these volcanoes. And that is what is responsible for tree kill. Where does sulfur dioxide come from? Magma beneath the surface. This failure to recognize reactivations of volcanoes also includes lesser known smaller volcanoes and lava fields all the way from Mexico to mid-British Columbia and all areas in between, as well as Alaska. This evidence says that the Cascadia megathrust earthquake will be as much as massive volcanic event as it is an earthquake event and a tsunami event. Now, I suggest that you think about the Cascadia developments that we've talked about and the white papers that Terry Rumpel have written that I have helped put together, so all of you might have the information necessary to make decisions and to write your emergency preparedness plans. We've talked about tsunami last week over in Japan. We talked about a small tsunami as a result of the 9.0 earthquake that happened off the coast of Mindanao, Philippines. We're going to have a tsunami as a result of the Cascadia earthquake. How high is high enough? Quite frankly, there are so many variables to know for certain. Higher is better. My estimation is this, is 600 feet is to allow for the worst potentials. There is no one that absolutely knows how large the Cascadia megathrust earthquake will be, nor the tsunami that it causes. There are superquakes in the Cascadia megathrust earthquake history that come at earthquake cluster ends. This has occurred in 2 out of 3 clusters in the last 10,000 years that we've been able to find. The evidence says we are likely at a cluster end this time again. We talked about volcanic risks, volcanic ash. We've talked about a lot of volcanic events even during the last week. Volcanic events rising as high as 45,000 feet above the summit of the volcanoes. Volcanic ash contains altered silicates and other minerals in various sizes. These toxins may also include ash as sulfur, strong acids, and fluoride. These particles, commonly coated with volcanic acids, are quite irritating to the eyes and lungs and even the skin. If rain is involved, the acid is a direct skin irritant, and the risk to the eyes increases. That's why we've talked about people wearing long sleeve clothing and having goggles and even some kind of face covering to avoid inhaling the ash or the gases. One should always use respiratory protection. Use that protection that you have available, and do not expose yourselves unnecessarily to volcanic ash than is absolutely necessary. Let me say that again. Do not expose yourselves to more volcanic ash than is absolutely necessary. We talked about silicates, silicosis. This is not a concern regarding volcanic ash according to recent medical research. Presumably, this is because the ash is such a strong irritant that is quickly expelled by coughing. I can find no medical studies that conclude that freshly erupted volcanic ash will cause silicosis. I leave you one study as a reference. A study made by Gunnar Gudmundsson, Gudmundsson, Gunnar Gudmundsson. His recent study involving respiratory exacerbation or any pre-existing lung condition is the main issue, the most common issue. Hydrogen halides, H-A-L-I-D-E-S. Hydrogen halides are strong acids that are emitted from volcanoes, as these often coat the ash. This makes volcanic ash a very strong respiratory irritant. Inescapable environment with heavy ashfall. Without some kind of respiratory protection, respiratory failure will result. This is considered rare as there are few accounts of large populations entrapped in heavy ash and ashfall environments, such as what happened at La Palma for significant time periods. La Palma was the last one. Okay? Volcanic ash is an eye irritant as well, due to not only the particulate matter, but also the acids that commonly coat the ash. Prolonged exposure will lead to corneal abrasion, conjunctivitis, and then enough acidic ash exposure may cause irreparable damage. Contact lenses should not be worn without some kind of covering to protect your eyes from exposure to ash. Let's talk about ash weight. When we were talking about the eruption of Cumbre Vieja volcano over in the Canary Islands on La Palma Island, we talked about ash weight, because ash was also being coated with rainwater. Rainwater started falling down onto the roofs of homes that were coated in ash. As the ash is pulverized rock, it is heavy. 1 square yard and 4 inches thick weighs between 150 to 200 pounds. Double that if it's wet. This can collapse roofs. Wet ash is also electrically conductive. It short circuits transformers, We also saw that over on La Palma Island. Power loss is common with a volcanic eruption. That happened in 1989 and again in 2003 with the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Ash clouds disrupt airwaves and airwave communication infrastructure, antennas, radio antennas on top of buildings and on cars. Ash clogs will also happen with air filter systems of cars, air filter systems of homes and buildings. The ash will stop all necessary machinery that is moving, and it will stop the machines from running. Those machinery needs to be closely maintained and tended. There's going to be extensive ash when these volcanoes erupt. Volcanism from multi-strata volcanoes is going to produce extensive ash fallout. There are many disastrous effects from extensive ash levels. Folks, please stay on target here. Stay on target with us here in the chat. If you get off target, you're not paying attention to anything we're saying. And this program is of no efficacy then. I'm trying to help you all here. I'm trying to help you. When these volcanoes erupt, we're also going to have water contamination. In 1912, ash from the Katmai volcano caused problems in Alaska. The ash covered all surface water sources with ash. Acidity of the ash, the acidity of the ash can make the water unfit for consumption, even if it is filtered. pH adjustment to the water may also be required. But fluoride is also a volcanic ash byproduct. Did you know that? Fluoride is a volcanic ash byproduct. Fluoride is also toxic in sufficient quantities. Contaminated water is a very real concern when we come to talking about extensive ash output in an area. This could last not just for days, months, but for years. Ash is also toxic to plants. It'll be toxic to plants for years. Increased soil acidity, fluoride poisoning, and leaf coverage from the ash blocking photosynthesis and plant respiration are just some of the causes. Gardens covered in ash won't produce. Extensive ash can cause biological wastelands for years. What are grazing risks? Grazing risk from animals. Ingestion of sufficient ash through grazing results in high mortality rate for all grazing animals, whether it be horses, goats, sheep, hogs, or cattle. Huge risk. Blindness. Blindness described by Alaskan residents in older documentation. Dogs were blinded by both acidic rain and ash causes. Wild animals were also found blinded as well. Fish kills. Ash causes short-term fish kill. Delicate gill structures do not tolerate ash well. Ash also depletes algae, part of the food chain for fish. Shellfish are equally affected. How about volcanic gases? Common volcanic gases in volcanic emissions include carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide may not sound very deadly, but it can be when associated with volcanic activity. Because it's heavier than air, it pushes lighter gases out of depressions. Say there is a gully and homes in this gully, and a volcano erupts. The carbon dioxide will settle in this little gully or this valley, and it pushes lighter air, such as air, lighter gases out of the air. It can cause an unseen death trap. Concentration of 3% causes headaches. 15% of carbon dioxide in the air can cause death. We talked about sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide forms as aerosols, including sulfuric acid, that are strong respiratory irritants. They also affect the eyes. Fog. We saw this in Hawaii, over on the Big Island, when Kilauea and Pu'u'o drained out, and the fissures erupted over on the Big Island. Volcanic ash and fog mix. This should be considered along with erupting ash. Water is steam. Water is steam. Hot volcanic ash. Hot volcanic ash. And magma. 6 to 7% of all magma is water. When water and ash meet, it turns to steam. Strong acids such as hydrochloric halides. Three different kinds of strong acids. Fluorine and hydrogen fluoride. Some volcanoes produce higher levels of these. Lower concentration of gases may include hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, carbon disulfide, carbon sulfide, hydrogen, hydrogen sulfide, chlorine, boron, methane, mercury vapor, and other organic compounds. Gold. Yes, gold is, strangely enough, part of a problem. Now, when we've talked about volcanic eruptions, sometimes we've talked about pyroclastic flows and lahars. Pyroclastic flows are associated with stratovolcano eruptions. They are made up of superheated gases as hot as 1300 degrees Fahrenheit, and they contain not only ash, but large chunks of rocks and boulders. They travel at an average speed of 62 miles per hour, but they can reach speeds of 430 miles per hour as well. Steep slopes and different eruption columns collapses are two factors related to the speed of a pyroclastic flow. But they also can create an air cushion underneath them. According to recent studies, and the resistance is very low as a result, because those pyroclastic flows are going over an air column, an air cushion. That will speed up the rate of the pyroclastic flow. Resistance being very low as a result. These flows are incredibly destructive. They can reach out 20 miles or more in some cases. They can also combine with melted snow and ice. and become a lahar, which can be up to 500 feet in depth and travel over 30 miles quite commonly. A lahar can be formed alone from volcanic heating of snow. We saw that over on Mount Rainier 3 years ago. Those can also be caused by slope failures as well. These carry trees and bricks and buildings and twigs and branches and boulders and anything else in their way. These lahars can travel at speeds of 50 miles per hour and less and are immensely destructive. Lahar flow distances vary, with 30 miles being very common, but 60 miles are also known. A lahar traveling 60 miles. That is a long distance east from Mount Rainier. Mount Baker had an explosive eruption about 6,600 years ago, and another in 1843. There are no record, or should I say there is no record, of a pyroclastic flow then. It has produced very large lahars that have stretched into Puget Sound. One lahar was 300 feet deep near Mount Baker and 25 foot deep 30 miles away. There are approximately 100,000 Washington state residents living directly atop old Mount Baker lahars. Over 100,000 Washington state residents living over and directly atop the lahars from Mount Baker. Let's talk about Glacier Peak. Less known, Glacier Peak has erupted 6 times in the past 14,000 years. 2 of those eruptions were 6 or 5 times larger than Mount St. Helens. These past eruptions produced tephra deposits, ash deposits, pyroclastic flows, and lahars that reach Puget Sound. Again, today you will find homes of residents on top of those lahars. Mount Rainier. We talked a lot about Mount Rainier in weeks and months past. That's because Mount Rainier is exhibiting all the qualities of a volcano about to erupt. Even 3.0 to 4.5 earthquakes, even as early as last week. There is geological evidence of 30 to 40 pyroclastic flows from Mount Rainier in the past 5,600 years. Rainier normally holds more than a cubic mile of ice. Rainier holds more than a cubic mile of ice. These often join to form lahars. Very large lahars reach into Puget Sound every 500 to 1,000 years. They have been recorded to have traveled a distance of 60 miles and have been as deep as 484 feet deep. We saw a lahar that happened when Mount Rainier got very warm one winter's day about 3 years ago. We saw an entire area on the side of Mount Rainier collapse and run all the way down the flank of Mount Rainier. We showed this here on Emergency Management Associates. During the Cascade Mountain megathrust earthquake, during the Cascadian megathrust earthquake, Mount Rainier is likely to produce a massive pyroclastic flow and or a lahar. Meanwhile, over 200,000 Washington residents live directly on top of past lahars from Mount Rainier. 200,000 Washington residents. How about Mount Adams? We haven't talked a lot about Mount Adams as of late. That's because the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network has not given us hardly any information about Mount Adams. A couple weeks ago we showed you a lot of activity, seismic activity at Mount Adams. Mount Adams is just east of Mount St. Helens. Rarely does Mount Adams produce a pyroclastic flow. It does have a more frequent history of producing lahars, but only 9 miles distance. 9 miles distance east of the volcano. Mount St. Helens is well known to most after it erupted in 1980. Pyroclastic flows and lahars are both potentials. Both have happened. But lahars are currently a lower risk at Mount St. Helens, and they have less height and less snow as a melt as a result. Mount Hood. Mount Hood, together with Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, is showing signs of a possible eruption going to happen. Mount Hood has been erupting 200 and 1500 years ago. Mount Hood is known to produce pyroclastic flows, and some dome collapses have normally traveled no more than 8 miles. These commonly mix with melted snow and ice to form lahars as well. 100,000 years ago, a lahar produced by Mount Hood was 400 feet thick. Lahar at Mount Hood was 400 feet thick, and it stretched about 27 miles north. This changed the course of the Columbia River, and smaller lahars are also more common. Mount Jefferson to the south has had episodes of activity over the past 300,000 years. Its history is one of explosive eruptions. The last eruption at Mount Jefferson was 15,000 years ago. Cascade volcanoes have been known to reactivate following 14,000 years of silence. So if we think about that, Mount Jefferson remains a potential problem. It is difficult to study due to time since its last eruption. Its threat and its range is thought to be about 10 miles for lahars and also pyroclastic flows. Let's talk about Three Sisters volcanoes. We talked a lot about Three Sisters. They have shown a potential for eruption there as well. We only have one seismograph that has been covering all three of those volcanoes. North Sisters, Middle Sister, and Broken Top are all large adjoining volcanoes that form the Three Sisters group. To the south, Mount Shasta is the most voluminous volcano in the Cascade Range. USGS publications suggest that Mount Shasta may be capable of producing pyroclastic flows 13 miles and lahars in excess of 30 miles in length. Shasta last erupted in 1876, as recorded by explorer La Perouse, L-A-P-E-R-O-U-S-E, La Perouse, who is offshore. Mount Shasta has erupted every 250 years on average for the past 750 years, and at least once per 600 years over the previous 10,000 years. Interesting. Let's talk about Mount Lassen. Mount Lassen last erupted in 1915. There are reports and images from that eruption that the phreatic blast reached 30,000 feet high. This is one of the best indicators of the potential of the Cascade volcanoes. Mount Lassen at that point had not erupted for the previous 27,000 years. This was preceded by 180 major steam venting episodes described as explosions in the 6+ months prior to the eruption. Isn't that interesting? 180 major steam venting episodes 6 months prior to the eruption. The activity first produced a 7-mile-long lahar. Then the main eruption produced a 3-square-mile pyroclastic flow, and then a lahar that reached out 10 miles. This past week we showed you evidence from a seismogram that showed plenty of evidence of the potential for a eruption at Mount Lassen. Now, this completes my list of the volcanoes that present the highest, largest threats of pyroclastic flows and lahars in Washington, Oregon, and in California. British Columbia has many volcanoes that are becoming more active as of late. Fortunately for Alaska residents, the threat they face may be related to pyroclastic flows and lahars that are low, due to the remoteness of the volcanoes in and around Alaska. Sitkin Volcano and Mount Wardell Volcano in southeastern Alaska are showing signs of unrest. We talked about Shishalden Volcano and many other volcanoes as of late in the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutian Island chain. There are a whole list of reactive volcanoes and volcanic fields. In California, all of the monitored volcanic areas of California show reactivation signatures. Salton Butte Volcano over in the Salton Sea. Both south to the border and north to the Garlock Fault. The Salton Sea has had magma infill signatures, and now, since the most active seismic site is Bombay Beach on the eastern shore of the Salton Sea, it appears that the Salton Sea is itself a lake-filled caldera. Lake-filled calderas cause massive stratospheric eruptions. Lake-filled calderas cause massive stratospheric eruption. How many lake-filled volcanoes do we see? Quite a number of them. When we talked about Southern California, we talked about the La Puente caldera, east of Los Angeles and west of Riverside. The apparent 11-mile wide caldera has infill signatures that mirror those of the Salton Sea at Bombay Beach, except those at La Puente are a little larger and more numerous, which may indicate a potential eruption of the La Puente caldera. Based on this finding, I consider this unrecognized caldera to pose a threat of eruption associated with the Cascadia megathrust earthquake. La Puente caldera has a ridge formation, as well as a bowl-shaped depression and a center uprise area. The La Puente caldera is rising because of volcanic expansion, magma reactivation of the volcano. Remember we've talked about Ridgecrest? Searles Valley has a very high potential of a major subsidence and lava extrusion. Subsidence meaning the land going down, and lava extrusion, lava reaching up from a dike beneath the surface, getting into the surface and causing a lava field. Koza volcanic field. We talked about Koza volcano in the past. It's not just one volcano, it's a volcanic field. Cones and craters all over the area. Areas of the Koza volcanic field are full of hotspots and earthquakes into Nevada. There is a major subsidence risk. Going north from there, over to the Mono and Inu volcanic field. It is also a volcanic active area. Mono volcano has a lake. What do we say about a lake-filled caldera? Clear Lake volcanic field, north of the geysers. It's a volcanic area. It has quite a bit of activity on seismograms, and even today had a 2.8 earthquake at Clear Lake. Major subsidence is also at risk there. I expect also to find and see lava flow outs rather than a large blast eruption. Lava flows out from the side or the flank of the volcano rather than a large volcanic blast. Cedar Buttes in California has the potential to erupt in a very small way, as consistent with local indicators. Mount Lassen has had recent earthquakes. We showed you the seismogram on Thursday. The associated seismology is poor. Mount Lassen has major tree kills all around Raker Peak, over to West Prospect Peak, Prospect Peak to Mount Hoffman. This is an area of approximately 9 square miles. Now I use Google Earth to back check the data and the date from the beginning of the tree kill there. And I found that began in 2013. The tree kill began in 2013. Why is that important? Sulfuric gas and carbon dioxide leaking from the magma beneath the volcano causes the tree kill. This is an additional way to date the early stage of magma infill into the volcano. That way we can use it as tree kill chronology. Magma infill causes uprise of gases that kills tree root systems. This is established science. Mammoth Mountain over East Central California. Recent magnitude 4 earthquakes and significant infill activity, plus hotspots all around Mammoth and that beautiful major volcano to the east. Okay? Hotspots. Stratospheric eruption is possible there. Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta has potential for stratospheric eruptions. Satellite imagery has shown major venting episodes from Mount Shasta as of late. Whaleback north of Shasta has tree kill areas. You can check that also on Google Earth imagery. This dates back to 2009. That beautiful, great, big, huge, long valley caldera east of Mammoth. All I can say is, and I sincerely hope not, because it is massive. Most of the Long Valley activity has been at Mammoth Mountain, which is associated with the Long Valley complex. Lake Tahoe. We've talked very little about Lake Tahoe as of late. Lake Tahoe has been having earthquakes regularly, and it's associated with volcanic features. Pyramid Lake to the north. Pyramid Lake to the north is linked to the Walker Lane Fault System, which is linked to, guess what? The Gulf of California, and a possible inland waterway from the Gulf of California to Pyramid Lake. Pyramid Lake is a volcano. It has associated features. The area has been quite active with small earthquakes. A lot. We also have unnamed cinder cones, volcanic ridges, and small lake-filled calderas that are unnamed in the East Sierra Nevadas and around Mount Shasta. They also have potentials for lava explosions and small eruptions. All over Nevada, literally all over Nevada, we've seen the same thing, even over around Area 51. Oregon. All of the monitored volcanic areas in Oregon show volcanic reactivation. All of them. From Gooseneck across to Cedar Mountain in California and north into Oregon. It's remarkable due to lack of activity in tree kills. This anomaly is relatively quiet on seismograms and has little or no tree kill. The first Oregon tree kill that I have found is trending north from Cedar Lake and Hoist Lake, and it is slight, very slight. Mount McLaughlin has no tree kills, and neither does Pelican Butte. The first large patch of tree kills is at longitude 122.17, 15 miles east of I-5. South to north, this is a distance of about 70 miles, and that is well east. So what I'm talking about is from latitude 41.43 in California to latitude 42.47 in Oregon. This anomaly is volcanic quietness. Volcanic quietness currently inside the volcanic trend of the Cascade Range. To the west of there is also quiet on seismograms, and many areas have tsunami-safe elevations. Tsunami-safe elevations. Tsunami-safe elevations. I've said that 3 times. That may also be important to you in terms of evacuation from certain areas. Hint, hint, hint. Crater Lake. Crater Lake with between 1.25 and 1.5 cubic miles of water. Crater Lake has 1.25 and 1.5 cubic miles of water in the caldera. A stratospheric eruption is quite likely. Crater Lake is also associated with a volcanic field that is roughly 25 miles wide and 35 miles long. Within this field are 7 cinder cones and 2 caldera formations. Diamond Lake is a caldera, with Mount Bailey on one side and Mount Thielsen on the other, and Mount Hollick on the other. Due east of Mount Bailey, there are large patches of tree kill. We checked imagery back to 2011 and 2012. tree kill. We've talked about Newberry volcano extensively in the past. Newberry volcano is lake-filled as well, and a stratospheric eruption is quite possible. Newberry volcanic field connects to Crater Lake volcanic field and is littered. It is littered with cones, small to large cinder cones, and lava expulsions from buttes and cones, and small calderas, some with lakes. This field continues all the way to sisters volcanoes, 3 of them. The area is roughly 60 miles by 75 miles long. There are many named smaller volcanoes there as well. We talked about Sisters. Sisters volcano shows reactivation signatures. Satellite imagery has shown major venting episodes from Sisters volcanoes. As a result, there have been large tree kill areas with an onset starting about 2005. That is according to imagery results. Mount Bachelor is also in close proximity to the south of Sisters, and it has a decent sized volcano. So far, USGS and the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network have not been keeping track of Bachelor volcano at all. They've had little to do with Bachelor for the past 3 years. Mount Washington we rarely talk about. It is large enough to be mentioned just north of Sisters volcano. Between active volcanoes, it is surrounded by a crescent of tree kill. The belt averages approximately 1.7 miles in width, and the diameter of the crescent is about 5 miles. The tree kill onset began about 2012, which means that Mount Washington has magma infill, which has what? Carbon dioxide and deadly sulfur dioxide, causing tree kill. We do not have access to any seismograms for Mount Washington. The tree kill is well enough. Black Crater also has tree kills related to that back as far back as 2005. Black Butte, Belknap Crater, Hayrick Butte, the calderas of Square Lake, Booth Lake, Little Lake, Blue Lake, Sutter Lake, Round Lake, Benson Lake, and 30 or so other cinder cones. They show seismic activity. Numerous other calderas stretch from Sisters to Mount Jefferson and have no monitoring that we can see. But reactivation from both north to south in this area says that that area is reactivating. Many areas of tree kills all throughout this volcanic feature exist. Tree kills act to confirm this potential. Mount Jefferson is also nearby there, with very little monitoring at all. The closest site, 18 miles away, is actively periodically, and there are thousands of acres of tree kills extending out from the base of Mount Jefferson to the south, east, and to the north. Those tree kills started about 2004. 3 Mile Caldera. Okay, it has no name, at least that we found. This has an average diameter. It is full of tree kills, only about 1.5 miles northeast of Mount Jefferson. The imagery dates back to about 2016. Mount Hood. There's been very documented activity of magma coming into the volcano. As of this past week, we showed hot spots. We showed you a lot of volcanic activity, magma incoming into the volcano. There have been major venting episodes by satellite imagery. The base of Mount Hood has been extensive tree kills to the south and to the north. Tom, Dick, and Harry Mountain is also active beside Mount Hood. We talked about Mount St. Helens. We talked about Mount Adams. We've talked very little about Goat Rocks. Goat Rocks is an older formation. But, together with Adams and Mount Rainier, it is worth noting that it had an M4 range volcanic earthquake activity. It is responsible for the largest andesite lava flow on Earth, and also according to thermodynamics of magma intrusion and secondary deep magma chamber discoveries as of late. It is actually likely to have deep live magnetic chamber, and tree kills date back around Goat Rocks to 2014. We talked about Mount Rainier. We talked about all the volcanoes in Washington State. There are many others that we haven't talked about. We talked about Glacier Peak and Mount Baker. There are other known risks all over Washington, Oregon, and California. These include nuclear power plants. San Onofre to the south in North San Diego County has now been decommissioned, but it is still hot. Should California be involved in the Cascadia megathrust earthquake, it would quite likely pose a threat. Everyone should be aware of nuclear power plant locations and keep those in mind when planning travel routes for after the CMTE event. Dams. Dams should also be in the back of your mind. Every state listed has had dams across major and minor rivers. These dams are at great risk of failure during the Cascadia megathrust earthquake event. Learn about the dams in your areas in relation to immediate threats or dams that may cause threats in your route or your location to safe areas. Think about it. Subsidence. In the past weeks and months, we've talked about subsidence. Ground level height is likely to be much greater than the public would expect during a Cascadia megathrust event. Crustal erosion potentials are also highly related to upwards of 25 years of crustal thickness erosion by magma infill. The evidence that promotes these potential risks are found through hotspot satellite imagery, seismic activity related to subsurface magma movements, tree kill evidence, crustal uplift that preceded Sisters area volcanic tree kills. Mobile air sampling results from the Searles Valley area. Mobile air sampling has indicated bad air. The evidence says the impact of this area would be highest in California, both east and west, except the northwestern area, and eastern Washington and Oregon states also show high risk of significant subsidence. There is a lower risk of significant ground subsidence in eastern or western Washington, western Oregon, and particularly southwestern Oregon. Prepare your evacuation escape routes. Prepare your escape routes. We've asked you all to prepare routes or evacuation routes to use to get out of Dodge in the event of an emergency. Prepare your escape routes, east and south. Desert environments, except for northeastern Washington state. All of the areas east of the Cascade Range, the Sierra Nevadas, and other central southern California mountain ranges are all deserts. This presents a great obstacle on its own. There are hundreds of miles of desert to cross east of the Cascades in Oregon or Southern California. You should consider the following if you're going to consider going east or south. Are the roads still intact? Do you have enough fuel to make it? Where are your gas stations located? Do you have spare air filters? Do you have spare air filters for your vehicles? Are the volcanoes erupting? If so, how much ash is being produced? Are the multiple volcanic beds expelling lava as they've done recurrently over tens of thousands of years? Is there enough subsidence that the inland sea has returned to the east of the mountains? Has the inland sea returned to the east of the mountains? The safest western areas for people located in the Cascade Range and west are northwestern California and south of Medford, Oregon. According to seismological evidence and elevation assessments, plus 7 other layers of evidence, there is an associate temporary safer areas map to assist you in the event of major eruptions. People located east of the Cascades should head north to the Idaho Panhandle and the Canadian border areas. The Oregon Relatively Safe Zone is bordered by Highway 199 to the west and Highway I-5 to the east, and the east entry point is Cave Junction. The north entry is through Grants Pass on Highway 238. Highway 238 is also the west entry point. By either taking the West Pine exit from I-5 to Central Point and connecting to Hanley Road, Highway 238, or coming up from the south on 5, you take the Fern Valley Road exit of I-5 and turn north on South Pacific Highway. Then take South Stage Road west, which connects at Highway 238. I expect this will be added to the defining of the safe zones. All the routes into this zone likely have advertising for the Oregon Caves via road signage. Think about it. You also need to be aware during fire season, this may or may not be a good area to go to. Think about that too. Think about that. Surgery saying, and will any gas stations be open? That is a big question. That is a huge question. Now, in my opinion, the way to safer areas for most of California is along the western edge of the Sierra Nevadas. The safer area for most of California is going along the western edge of the Sierra Nevadas. Now, both Terry Rumpel and myself have studied every seismogram and volcanic risk, including tsunami damage and the tsunami damage potential, to give you this advice. And it is just that, advice. I do not know, and I have no way to tell ahead of the Cascadia megathrust earthquake event how each area will be affected with certainty. You have to do your own homework and determine what is best for you. That is why I've spent many hours presenting all of this evidence to you as a means for you to do your own assessments for your own area. I've done similar work to define areas that will be safe for me and my family, and for some of you. How you prepare for this is entirely your choice. But keep in mind that the pioneers required a specific list of necessities to make a long journey and then start over. They planned and they prepared and they replanned. I suggest that it is in your best interest to follow the lessons that can easily be learned from our pioneer ancestors. There is so much evidence of all of this evidence from our pioneers' ancestors. There's a ton of evidence. And it comes to face each of us if we are not prepared. I pray, and I pray sincerely, that you will see the truth of all of the information that I presented tonight and in the past, and do so in your own best interest and the interest of your families. I can ask now that may God bless us all. May God bless us all that we'll be safe. Now, with that said, does anybody have any questions? I've talked a lot. I've given you a lot of information tonight. Does anybody have any questions? I don't mean to be rough. I don't mean to put people in situations where you might feel that I'm not recognizing you, but I'm trying to give you the information that you need to spare yourselves a lot of aggravation. I've given you a lot of information to help prepare all of us for what's going to happen. Surgery is saying not a lot of areas to go to. You're right. Each of us has to determine where we're going to go to and what we're going to do and how we're going to get there. That is something that each of us must get together and decide what we're going to do. No one can make that decision for you. You need to also make that for yourself, unfortunately. Unfortunately. Mind Matters is excellent information. I thank you for that. John Yo says, do you think it will be felt in Iowa? I certainly do. The seismic energy will be massive in the Cascadia megathrust earthquake area. And that energy will go north, it'll go south, and it will also go east across the entire continent. Elizabeth is also asking, can you please address the 2.5 earthquake that happened in Crandon, Wisconsin? USGS says it was one-off. USGS is just that, BS. Okay? That area has some small, insignificant earthquake faults beneath the surface. These are not known earthquake faults. These are random faults. When you have seismic energy, when you have earth movement will be very swift and quick, just like that. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but deep inside the earth there are cracks. And that is why we had that earthquake over there in Crandon, Wisconsin. Deep inside the earth. Plus, folks, if you don't already know, there is a major volcano over in the Great Lakes, in the western Great Lakes. There is a major volcano, and you can see it in satellite photography on Google Maps. On Google, I shouldn't say Google Maps, Google Earth. You can see it. And folks, volcanic activity can also cause these minor earthquakes out to the peripheral areas around and in the volcanic area. I'm not saying it has anything to do with the volcano, but I am saying all those tiny cracks and such deep in the crust of the earth can cause those minor earthquakes. Okay? It happens. That's a very good question. Thank you for that. Rob52 is putting up the way you guys can get hold of us on our Gmail. He's also put up how you can contribute to our program via PayPal and Venmo. You can also send cards and letters to us and slip donations into cards and letters to P.O. Box 422, Valdese, Valdese, North Carolina. Zip code is 28690. We appreciate that. We appreciate all the cards and letters that you guys have sent. They're very much loved and appreciated. Now, folks, we've been here for quite a couple hours here. I want to close with a scripture here. This is several verses that I want to read to you. And now, my beloved brethren, I have said these things unto you that I might awaken you to a sense of your duty to God, that ye may walk blameless before him, that ye may walk after the holy order of God, after which ye have been received. And now I would that ye should be humble, and be submissive and gentle, easy to be entreated, full of patience and long-suffering, being temperate in all things, being diligent in keeping the commandments of God at all times, asking for whatsoever things ye stand in need of, both spiritual and temporal, always returning thanks unto God for whatsoever things ye do receive. And see ye that ye have faith, hope, and charity, and then ye will always abound in good works. And may the Lord bless you, and keep your garments spotless, that ye may at last be brought to sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the holy prophets who have been since the world began, having your garments spotless, even as their garments are spotless in the kingdom of heaven, to go no more out. And now, my beloved brethren, I have spoken these words unto you according to the Spirit, which testifieth in me. And my soul doth exceedingly rejoice, because of the exceeding diligence and heed which ye have given unto my word. And now, may the peace of God rest upon you, and upon your houses and lands, and upon your flocks and your herds, and all that you possess, your women and your children, according to your faith and good works, from this time forth and forever. And thus I have spoken. Amen. Brothers and sisters, that's a prophet talking to all of us. Folks, this is true. This is true. I have given a lot to you over the past 4.5+ years. I will continue to do that. I will always continue to give you as much information as I possibly can, and I will always bear my testimony of the fact that I love Jesus Christ. I know Jesus Christ to be the Son of God, the only beloved Son and begotten Son of God. May God bless each one of us to achieve our greatest potential. May God bless us and bless our families and keep us safe. At the early part of the program, we talked about a hotel in Texas being blown out by a gas explosion. Let's go back to that and see if there's any more information since then.
Tonight, the breaking news: United finds loose bolts on several of its Boeing 737 MAX 9s. This comes just days after a plane wall blew out mid-flight on the same type of aircraft. We've got the new information just coming in. The terrifying discovery, hundreds of flights are canceled after that scary incident at 16,000 feet.
There was moments of, am I going to make it?
The door panel just found by investigators as we learn about warning lights in the cockpit.
Okay, that's among other things. I thought they were going to do, well, let's see, hold on a second.
Breaking news, a hotel explosion rocks downtown Fort Worth. After a weekend.
Okay, they're talking about weekend snows, coast to coast. Folks, we talked about this storm that's going coast to coast at the beginning of the program. Folks, it's deadly. Here on the East Coast, we're supposed to have 50-mile-per-hour winds and heavy rains. Heavy rains and snow are expected east to west and also north to south. I would urge each one of us to take precautions tonight before we lay ourselves down to sleep. Make sure we are protected. We may also face electrical grid problems with the winds and heavy rains and possible snow. Watch yourselves. Make sure you're protected. Make sure you're prepared for whatever may happen tonight or tomorrow and in the coming days. Watch out, be prepared, and do what you have to do. This is serious. God be with you this day and always. I have a great feeling that we're going to make it, but snow is already coming down hard in places in Iowa and the Midwest. It's headed east. Get prepared, guys. It might be bad. Have a good night, everyone. I love you very much. I didn't want this program to last on and on like it has, and I ask for your forgiveness for that. But we've had a lot of information to give you tonight, and I think we've done that. Have a good night, everybody. I love you very much. We will see you on the other side. Take care, everybody. Be safe. If anything else happens tonight, we'll be back here to tell you about it just as soon as the information becomes available. Until then, take it easy, guys. We'll see you later. Good night. God be with you till we meet again.